my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I have two new signs of the times for you. One, the nation sinks to a new low. There's a new story coming out of the White House. You probably already know about it, but if not, don't worry, it's really bad. And then we have a bunch of dead fish in Texas, and we're going to go over the details of all that. Before we do, here's the update on the Book of Mormon sharing challenge. 5,980 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared, only 20 away from 6,000, and then only 8 away from having 600 people that have joined this challenge. So good job, everybody. So I found out about this from, let me pull it up here. First, I got this email from Candace. She says, just curious if you saw the dead fish in Texas. And then I got an email from Colton Walters, who said essentially the same thing. And then he included this additional story about this Pride event at the White House. So let's start with the fish, and then let's work our way to the more horrible story. Okay, so I'm going to read his thing here. He says, two articles for you here. I come into work every morning and check the news to see how much closer we are to the second coming. The news always affirms to me that we are getting close. Yeah, you can never, these days, like every day, just open up the news. Yep, there it is. Just one step closer. The hyperlink I sent you is about tens of thousands of fish dead on a beach in Texas. And the other article about a pride festival in the nation's capital, with some referring to it, or referring it to Sodom and Gomorrah. I also seem to be getting a lot of news about UFO sightings. UFO and aliens don't interest me, so it shocks me how that comes across as often as it does. I chalk it down to signs and wonders in the heavens. Volcanoes, the San Andreas Fault, and Mormon crickets also made the news this morning. It's getting interesting. Yeah, it sure is, and I'm doing the best that I can to keep track of this. I have my second coming timeline, so we're going to take a look at this. And yeah, it certainly is getting interesting. When it comes to the UFO news, I used to be like really into UFOs and aliens. You know, I grew up watching the Discovery Channel, History Channel, and other things like that, and just getting into it. And I still am to an extent, but I think my views have kind of changed over time. I do think that there is something going on in the heavens, although I'm not so sure anymore that it's aliens. Or interdimensional beings, other than... Anyway, it's complicated. That's not what this video is about. Okay, so let's look at the dead fish. All right, so here's the article. This is from The Cut, a story by Bindu Bansanath. Meanwhile, in Texas, fresh signs of impending apocalypse. I recently mentioned how it always piques my interest whenever the word apocalypse or last days or end times or whatever, whenever that shows up in news articles. The reason why is because hopefully those words and phrases are getting into the minds of the readers that are reading the articles or watching the news stories, and maybe in a small way waking them up. Now, when it comes to fish, before we get into the article, when it comes to fish, when I was doing my other channel, Watch for the Signs, I was keeping a tracker of all the different stories I could find about mass, just like fish kills, what they're called, mass die-offs of fish. And I basically kept track of the year, the day, death toll, what kind of animal, because it's not just fish, it's crabs, lobsters, whales, so on, the species, where it happened, the cause, according to the official releases and the news reports, and then the source. But this is before I started doing my sources in Chicago manual of style format, so I'm gonna have to go through here and redo all of these, and I think I'm going to add this to my main spreadsheet. I used to have a separate spreadsheet for that channel, but what the heck, maybe I'll just go ahead and try and keep track of these, because I'm sure that more are going to come up. So as you can see here, there's a lot of different reasons why fish die. There's a lot of where there's a lack of oxygen because of the water heating up. There was a weird one here where they died because of moon wobble, but anyway, that's another story. There's a lot that are unknown. They don't know why it happened. Some is disease, some is pollution. There's actually a lot of unknowns. That's probably the top, I should take I should keep a tally so we can easily see what the top causes are based on the ones that I have here. So there's different reasons, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes we get into the trap where we're like, well, we can explain it, so it's not a sign. Just because you know what the cause is, it doesn't mean that it's not a sign. Okay, because there's a lot of things to think about. Things to think about are, how often is it happening? Is it getting more intense? Is there more cases of this happening? Because you might look at this and be like, oh, it's pollution, we're doing it. It doesn't mean that it's not a sign. Okay, it's a horrible thing that's happening. It's changing the earth. It's killing fish. You know, just because we know the cause of it does not mean that it's not a sign. Signs don't have to be supernatural, spectacular things. It can just be a trend of how things are going in the world. So you can look over this if you want to. The link for it will be in the description below, and you can go over this. I'll probably keep this name Die-Offs, so you can find it there unless I change it in the future. Okay, so this is something I'm aware of. Uh, let's go back to the article and see what it says. Okay, it says spring usually leads into summer, but this year it seems to be setting us up for a season of pure apocalypse. Considering the numerous signs, or consider the numerous signs. 10 million acres and counting have burned in Canada, putting the country on track for its worst wildfire season ever. And if that's the case, remember I do have a tracker for wildfires and keeping track of like countries, provinces, states that have had their worst wildfire in history. So if Canada is the next one, that's going to be big. Okay, the ensuing smog turned swaths of sky over the east coast in an ominous shade of Blade Runner orange last week, and experts warned that the putrid sargassum piling up on Florida's beaches might be harboring flesh-eating bacteria. Oh yeah, I heard about that. In addition to creating a heinous stench. Meanwhile, in Texas, state officials are scrambling to remove the tens of thousands of dead fish that washed up along the the Gulf Coast over the weekend. Doomsday, anyone? Later on, I'm just going to skip down. Investigators determined low dissolved oxygen as the cause of the mass die-off, noting that fish kills are relatively common in hotter summer months as schools of fish get trapped in shallow waters and lose oxygen as a result. Common as it is, experts suggest that higher water temperatures buoyed by global warming can exacerbate the trend and disrupt local ecosystems. Okay. And so that's what interests me right there. Global warming. I don't care what your explanation for it is or whatever. I tend to think that it is happening, although I don't tend to go along with uh, the messaging being put out that how you're supposed to believe and think about it. They ram it down your throats. I tend to think that the Earth is changing and is preparing to become a terrestrial world, a paradisiacal terrestrial world, and it's as simple as that. I guess we'll find out when it actually happens, or whenever we get an actual answer. But I think that that's what's happening. And so, if there's an increase of die-offs, even though it's somewhat common, if it's increasing, I would count that as a sign because it's a sign that the Earth is changing, right? So I put it on my tracker. It's my first entry for 2023. I don't know if there's been others, but tens of thousands. It's hard to put like an exact number on these because they have to just do estimates. Sometimes they do estimates, like in this case down here, 40 million. Oh, this was trees. That's what that is. The moon wobble in trees. I just put like, regardless of species, but most of these are marine species. So, but in this case, they estimate tens of thousands. Here, let me zoom in. The species was Gulf menhaden. It's just like I looked it up. It's just like a silvery small fish. And this happened in Texas. So, yeah, I would say that's another sign of the times. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. I'm going to read what Colton Waters put in the in his email because he copied and pasted some of the highlights, because the article itself, it has stuff that's more on the graphic side that you probably don't want to see. That's how bad it is. So the name of the article, or the title of the article, is Nation in Decline. Nudity at White House Pride Event Sparks Hysterical Fears. I think you should put hysterical in quotes, because that's an opinion. 1600 Pennsylvania or Sodom and Gomorrah? That is the question our nation's leading conservatives are asking themselves after President Joe Biden hosted a pride event at the White House. During the event, the White House hung a pride flag from the columns of its rear portico, which prompted bizarre outrage from some in the far right who believe it was an act of treason and an insult to the nation's armed forces. Pride events have become a flashpoint in the right wing's anti LGBTQ movement, as Republicans have sought to demonize the movement. So, can you tell that maybe this article is a little bit biased one way? Uh, Wrote Ben Shapiro, the ideological coup is complete. Continuing, however, that concern was soon eclipsed after a video went viral of an attendee flashing went viral. Quote unquote, nation in decline, wrote one prominent right wing influencer. The video comes from trans TikToker at Rose Montoya, who filmed, quote unquote, herself meeting President Joe Biden and held her hands over her breast while a voiceover asked, "Are we are we topless at the White House?" Others reference the biblical destruction of the towns in ancient times that has become synonymous with sin and excess. Sodom and Gomorrah, they wrote. Uh, Quote, I thought this had to be fake. It was just too degenerate even for the Biden White House, but nope, this is where we're at. Disgraceful, wrote one. In a TikTok, Montoya responded to the backlash, noting that it's legal to go topless in D.C. While nudity is allowed in D.C. and on federal land, it's unclear if there are regulations unique to the White House, and that they, quote, fully support the free, well, I'll leave, yeah, the free body part movement. Montoya noted there would not be as much of an outcry if, quote unquote, she identified as, quote unquote, she previously did as a man. Quote, all you're doing is, all you are doing is that you are affirming I'm a woman, quote unquote, she said. Montoya said that, quote unquote, she was inspired by, quote unquote, her trans masculine friends showing off their mastectomy scars and wanting to join in their joy. Yeah, and there's pictures of that. So, biological females that had mastectomies, and they were topless. Quote, I had no intention to be vulgar or profane in any way. I was simply living in joy. I mean, so what is vulgar and profane to you then? I put that question to you. What is vulgar or profane? Does that exist? Yeah, so, and then there was this article. Well, no, go to this. Okay, so this is Newsweek. There's one thing I wanted to read from here. There, that person is. Right here. Okay. Rose Montoya was among hundreds welcomed by President Joe Biden on Saturday for a celebration on the South Lawn described by the administration as the largest pride event ever hosted at the White House. I'm taking that seriously, so much so that I'm putting it on my timeline right here. It's the most recent entry. Okay, these things after this, these are things that are going to take place in coming months and years. But this is the most recent entry. White House hosts largest ever pride event. That's not good. That's not a good development. Okay. When I talked to Rabbi Gerfine, and by the way, I'm not going to be having him on the channel this week. He's had a couple things come up, so we're going to resume next week. So stay tuned. But in past conversations that I've had with him, he talked about the fact, now this is from a Jewish point of view, but I could see it being valid as far as our doctrine is concerned as well. He talked about the fact that, according to Jewish tradition, the flood didn't happen until it was society that officially accepted all these things back in the time of Noah. And he pointed to a place, I can't remember if it was in the Talmud or somewhere else, but he has it bookmarked, because this is such a, like the article said, such a flashpoint, hot topic right now. And so, if that's right, if that Jewish tradition is right, that and I mean, I think that it probably is. When it's one thing if you are individually uh, struggling with something, because we all have different vices and struggles and obstacles and different things. Some people it's gambling, some people it's alcohol, other people it's whatever, all sorts of things. We all have our different weaknesses, and it's one thing if you struggle with it individually, but once it gets to the society level or the civilization or the world level where the entire world officially is accepting it, that's probably where uh, things get really bad and where God gets really upset and is probably one of the red lines. So anyway, that's just something to think about, but that's why I'm putting it on here. So this was on June 10th. And then afterwards, ABC News, White House denounces handful of attendees at Pride event who posed topless. Simply unacceptable. Well, I wish he felt that other things were unacceptable and maybe that wouldn't have happened. The White House is responding after several transgender guests exposed their chest at the administration's Pride celebration this past week. The incident drew backlash as inappropriate, including from conservative commentators like C.J. Pearson, who suggested online that it brought quote-unquote shame on the country. Yeah, it does. On Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Karen or Karine, I don't know, Jean-Pierre told reporters, quote, the behavior was simply unacceptable. We've been very clear about that. It was unfair to the hundreds of attendees who were there to celebrate their families. So, we're going to continue to be clear on that. It's not appropriate. It's disrespectful. And let's not, it really does not reflect the event that we hosted to celebrate the LGBTQ plus families. No, it does reflect that. That's what that's all about. That's part of the degeneracy, the in your face that you see so often in parades and different places in culture and movie. It is the embodiment. It does represent that. It does. So to have this false. Okay, let's tone it down. I'm not so sure that I'm that convinced at your outrage about this. When you accept this entire thing, it goes with it. That's just my opinion. So, yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're at, everybody. The White House hanging a flag that represents degeneracy and immorality and people's sexual preferences. There's a flag for that. There's a flag for people who like same-sex body parts and people that want to pretend like they're the opposite sex or whatever, because there's a spectrum, right? It's an entire spectrum. So just live whatever fantasy you want to live. That is the flag that's flying from what was it? The south or the backside portico of the White House. And not only was there the flag, but there's an actual celebration taking place right there. So, yay. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.